Emmett, it's great to have you on the Her Sport Show and congratulations on your success at the National Championships.
Thanks very much. Great to be here.
So who stood out for you over the weekend?
So I guess when we look at all the events, I mean, I predominantly deal with distance runners, but the sprinters definitely took a lot of the limelight on the weekend. Probably the star of the future in Irish athletics that we got to see in action on Sunday was Rhasidat Adeleke in the 100 meters. So, I mean, she's been phenomenal over the last 2 years since she moved to the States. Particularly this season, she's had a real breakthrough year. And it was great to see her in action against the best of the Irish sprinters on Sunday. And while the conditions of the weekend impacted the events to some extent, there was a very strong headwind in the home straight. So the times weren't particularly quick. What we did get was some brilliant racing, and that women's 100 meters was fantastic. Molly Scott got out really quickly, had a huge lead built up at sort of 50, 60 meters, and then Rhasidat gradually started pulling her back and probably only got to the lead with about 2 meters to go, ended up winning it by 100th of a second. So that was, I think for most people, probably the highlight of the weekend.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, a lot of people talk about Rhasidat and a lot of people were very excited to watch her race. And like, I had interviewed Molly a couple of weeks ago, and we're keeping an eye on what kind of form she's in as well. So she wouldn't have surprised some people. But she's pushing Rhasidat all the way. Like, the two of them, the 60-meter record was exchanged hands in the last couple of months as well. So Molly's certainly not one to be written off.
No, absolutely not. And probably it's interesting that I think when you look at their trajectory of their careers, Molly is very much 60 meters, 100 meters. She's very powerful out of the blocks, really quick over that first 40 or 50 meters. Whereas Rhasidat is obviously, she's very tall, takes her a while to get into her stride, and ultimately she's probably going to be a 200, 400 meter athlete. So that 100 meters is kind of a happy medium for both. It's probably the fairest distance for both of them to race off against at the moment. But when you look at Molly, I mean, her indoor season was fantastic. She had a really strong season. They traded that on our 60-meter record, as you say. So there's a little bit of a rivalry developing there, and I think over 60 and 100 over the next couple of years, that's something we're going to see develop a little bit more.
Yeah, no, they know each other very well. Obviously, they've been racing each other for a couple of years, so I think they're probably enjoying the competition and to be, pushing the boundaries together. Like, all they want to do is be as fast as they possibly can on the international stage. In terms of kind of Rhasidat's journey, like, there's a couple of people asking, like, should she be moving up to that 200, 400? Like, obviously, she's traditionally raced 100 and 200, and she's raced a handful of 400s. If she moves up to the 400, then obviously she's going against Sophie Becker, Phil Healy. With the height of Rhasidat, is that potentially the better option for her?
Yeah, I mean, in a general sense, athletes who are taller take a little bit longer to get into their stride. So you would generally say that athletes with that sort of stature will be better over the longer distances because they simply don't have the time to get up to full speed over something like 100 meters. So, and I suppose the trajectory of her career as well, in that she's still developing her raw speed over 60 and 100 meters, but as she matures as an athlete, her endurance improves. You would think that will translate into better 200 meters and 400 meters. And really, everything in her career at the moment is pointing towards somebody who's going to be a world-class 400 meter runner in years to come. I mean, she's only run a handful of 400 meters, but they were bloody impressive 400 meter races.
But she holds the national record. So.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's not bad for an event that you're dipping your toe in. Yeah, and then if you look, I mean, one of the other highlights of the weekend was the women's 400, where you had Sophie Becker and Phil Healy. And we were missing Charlene Mosley from that. And we also had Cliona Manning, who got bronze. So we've got it's a golden era of 400 meter running at the moment. And in terms of those girls competing internationally as individuals, it's fantastic. But there's a real mouthwatering prospect of getting all of them together on a relay team and challenging for medals at major championships over the next couple of years. And well, that prospect is always great. It's a big challenge for Athletics Ireland as a federation to try and get these girls together and make sure that they're all on the same trajectory and looking at major championships, particularly Worlds and Olympic Games, because there is medal potential there over the next couple of years.
Were you surprised not to see Phil Healy go home as a national champion this year?
I suppose there was very little between the two girls all season. I think they were within a tenth of a second of each other. I think it was 51.6 and 51.7 is what they both run for 400 meters. So certainly wasn't a surprise that Sophie won. It was a cracking race. Of contrast, Sophie went out really, really hard, and she probably had about 7 or 8 meters of a lead down at the Clonlift Clubhouse at 200 meters, and then gradually as they came up the home straight, Phil started to pull her back, and again it came right down to the wire. So it's great to see, because that we've got that level of competition, because ultimately they want to go on and they want to be as fast as they can. But having some domestic competition always adds a nice edge to these things, and we certainly got plenty of that at the moment.
Yeah, no, they're two athletes that are pushing each other further and further. And, you know, obviously Phil would have been the recognized name, you know, before the Olympics, but Sophie's certainly making her mark. And she's been in really good form this season, I suppose. You know, we've gotten used to hearing Phil's name over 100, 200 and 400. So it's interesting to see, obviously, that she's specifically focusing on the 400 at the moment, and on whether we'll see her in action maybe again over the 100 and 200. It's all heating up anyways in the sprint distances.
The other one that was interesting actually was, I don't know if you noticed, Phil's sister Joan actually got
That's what I was just going to say. I was like, not to forget that Joan went home with a medal as well, so there was a silver and a bronze in that house.
Yeah, it was a busy Monday putting all the new medals on the mantelpiece in the Healy household after the weekend.
In terms of the hurdles as well, so Sarah Lavin, she obviously claimed the 100-meter hurdles title, the 7th national record for her, and then Kelly McGrory in the 400 hurdles. So, how do you think we're doing as a nation in hurdles at the moment?
Yeah, so Sarah has had a breakthrough season where her indoors were absolutely phenomenal. To make a world indoor final over 60-meter hurdles is a really classy performance, and she's beginning to come into the territory where Derval O'Rourke was a couple of years back, whereas her 60-meter times are beginning to challenge Derval's records at this stage, which is great to see. And I think over the next couple of years, what you'd like to see, and I'm sure what she'd like to see, is that she begins to challenge that 100-meter record of Derval's, which is, I mean, it's incredibly fast. So she's got a little bit of ground to make up there at the moment. I guess with the hurdles at the weekend in the Nationals, the thing that was probably the biggest factor in it was the headwind again. And it's even more of an issue for hurdlers in that they've got a certain stride pattern in between each hurdle, and when you're into a strong headwind, as they were on Saturday and Sunday, it really messes up that stride pattern. So I think for the likes of Sarah, they were quite happy to just get through the weekend, you know, get the title on the board, and come away without any major problems as such, and just move on to some hopefully faster and calmer conditions in the weeks ahead for their championships.
Talk to us a bit about the middle distance, because there were a few names maybe that we were missing. I know Ciara McGeehan had COVID. Sarah Healy chose to race in the 800, not the 1500. So as a middle distance expert, give us the lowdown on the 800 and the 15.
Yeah, so Sarah dropped down to the 800 from her traditional distance of the 15, and mainly because she's actually racing the 1500 meters in Stockholm on Thursday night. So she wanted a little bit of a sharpener there, and she wanted to test it herself against some of the 800 meter girls. So I think in advance, probably people were billing that 800 meters as a real head-to-head with herself and Louise Shannon. I mean, Louise has had an absolute storming season. She ran 1:59, break the national record in Belfast a couple of weeks ago. But when it came down to it, Louise was adamant she was going to win in her own event on Sunday. She was very classy in the home straight, pulled away very impressively to win that 100 meter in the last 100 meters. And she's going to go on to Europeans and Worlds over the next couple of weeks, and it'll be exciting to see if she can move that dial on a little bit, because Irish 800 meter running for women over the last few years has just moved to a different level. Where a few years ago 203, 204 was the sort of time that would have won you a national title. 203, 204 would barely get you into a national final. Now the standard has gone so high. So it's great. And Georgie Hartigan was another person who was missing from that 800 meters at the weekend. And Nadia Power, who's been injured, she's not going to race this season. So again, we're talking about so many people that weren't there, which is great that there's not just the girls that are on the scene, but there's lots of depth behind it. The women's 1500, I suppose it was more of a domestic field. We didn't have Ciara because she picked up COVID. So you were left with a race where it was a lot of the very good domestic girls had a real chance that, you know, an opportunity that doesn't come along too often, where the likes of the Ciaras or the Sarah Healys had not been taking part that year. It opens up the opportunity of winning a national title, and it came down to a great scrap down the home straight between Niamh Markham, Maisie O'Sullivan, and Carla Sweeney, who ended up winning out at the end. And Carla was really strong down that last 100 meters. So great to see that, a real typical 1500 meters, 2 laps just crawling around, looking at each other, nobody willing to take it on. And then gradually over the last 600, it began to wind up. And it was a great finish down the home straight there as well, and a great win for Carla.
Yeah, I know it was, you know, we've been watching middle distance over the last couple of years, and there certainly is loads of talent. I think it's it's great to see that we have the depth in sprinting, and we also have depth in middle distance at the moment as well. In terms of the 5K, Fionnuala McCormack out to impress as ever. I think it was she passed the line having just done 600 meters, and she'd already put a distance between herself and the group. And I think what like kind of stood out there was like nobody was willing to kind of go with her, or like to try and go with her. It's like she's almost so intimidating that everyone's like, yeah, it's fine, we'll just do our own race, we'll let Fionnuala and do whatever she's doing. So yeah, look, she took that by the scruff of the neck, and it's not surprising. And then the rest of the group stuck together for a while, then started to spread out, and then we had two sisters join her on the podium. So we'd Ida and Saoirse Nagona. What stood out to me was that the three podium finishers are all 37 years old, and two of them have young children. Yeah,
it was it certainly caught the eye. I suppose when you look at Fionnuala, first of all, I mean, she's a once in a generation athlete from an Irish point of view, and that she's been so strong over such a long period of time. And there was an element on Saturday that when she went, that people probably gave her a little bit too much respect. And I think the girls who were second and third would probably say maybe afterwards that they might have liked to have covered that move a little bit more aggressively at the time. I think
12 seconds was the time difference between Fionnuala and second.
Yeah, so I mean, once the gap opened, it didn't grow too significantly in the second half of the race. So I think from that point of view, they may regret not covering it initially, but like Fionnuala was very, very strong. She was out, and again, not to keep talking about the wind, but it was very windy again on Saturday afternoon, and she was into that on her own for most of the race.
Whereas the two girls, the three of them are not particularly big people either, so the wind was going to have a good go at you.
But I suppose, the fact that you've got three girls there who were 37 years of age, it certainly was unusual. And I suppose the conversation afterwards was, and has been on occasion, is particularly when Fionnuala is at the fore, is like, okay, she's coming to the end of her career, where are the athletes coming through behind? But I think sometimes our eye is drawn to a result like Saturday, but when you look back over the last couple of years, it probably hasn't been the case. We've actually got a good crop of middle distance girls coming through. And in particular, I suppose if you look back towards cross country, which is a good benchmark of it's a good reflection of the overall health of middle distance running in the country. Fionnuala didn't run that because she was doing a marathon, and then she came back and finished first Irish finisher at Eurocross the week afterwards. But at the actual national championships themselves, you had Michelle Finn, you had Sarah Healy, with the Flanagan sisters, you had Aoife Cook. They were the girls that were in contention, and they're certainly, all in their mid-20s, early 30s. I suppose is what you might consider a standard age for most middle distance runners at this stage. So I don't think that there's a massive chasm there, that there's a massive gap in terms of the talent coming through. I think it probably just was a set of circumstances, because a lot of those girls that I just mentioned that were competitive at national cross country and have been very competitive for us over the last couple of years, just for one reason or another, weren't there on Saturday. And the three girls that did come through, they took advantage of that, and it was good to see. Actually, afterwards, I've met Fionnuala just around the top end, and she's chasing the kids around the top end, trying to, not worried so much about her warm down as she was about actually getting the kids home that evening.
They're kind of that size where you need to keep an eye on them. They could be gone wandering.
Very much so, yeah. But it's something that I suppose when you look at international athletics over the years, we're not unaccustomed to seeing women in their late 30s who've had kids in their say early 30s coming back to the sport after a period of time being away and being very competitive. And I suppose two names that spring to mind would be Paula Radcliffe in particular, had some of her best performances later in her career after she had her kids. And there was also, if people might remember, back in 2008, there was a 38-year-old Constantina Dita from Romania who came back at 38 years of age and won the Olympic marathon. That was a bit of a head turner at the time. But in terms of, I suppose, after having kids, there is some evidence to suggest that there's a slight hormonal benefit after having kids, and that sometimes on a cardiovascular basis as well, that the heart chambers change a little bit, and that the ability to pump blood around the body and ultimately pump oxygen around the body is somewhat increased after having kids. So that there's a very slight performance benefit to that. Increased estrogen levels is also another one. So there is a trend that once women come back to the sport later in life, if everything else allows, that there's no reason that they can't be competitive at a very high level for well into their 30s and even sometimes into their 40s.
Yeah, no, I did think it was interesting that we had a set of twins, one with children and one without, and I was like, well, there's the perfect science experiment.
Yeah, exactly.
Because obviously, like, I've heard a bit about you know, the scope for you know, women as they're kind of getting a bit older and that have had children, and in longer distance events, they can still remain to be, you know, very competitive and doing very well. And you know, is Sinead Diver in her early 40s? If I'm not
She is, yeah.
mistaken?
Sinead is in her early 40s, and the girl that I coach, Anne-Marie McGlynn, who is 41, so she did some of the best performances of her career after she turned 40, and her kids are, I think, probably in their early teens at this stage. So again,
I did think having a set of twins, I was like, if there's a time to do it, I was like, we need to analyze their results from you know, before Ida had her children and after, and see what the differences have been. But she only had her second child there 8 months ago, so she said for her it's just like getting out of the house, it's running, and it's like enjoying it. She was like, you know, obviously to land on the podium is you know, is something great, you know, great for her as well. But she's like, honestly, it's just like getting out of the house and you know, taking a bit of time to herself, and the fact that she's getting results as well is great. But yeah, no, look, I was chatting with Rob Heffernan after, and he was saying you know, about the depth on the men's side in the 5K at the moment, and I think looking at the fact that the three on the podium were 37, but you make a valid point that some of the athletes that we'd be used to probably seeing in the likes of a 5K actually just weren't running. And then, to be fair, Michelle Finn was doing the 3,000 meter steeplechase as well.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't be as concerned about the overall health of Irish middle distance running, because a lot of the girls who like I said, have been very competitive for us over the last couple of years, particularly the Flanagans, Eva Richardson, Michelle, obviously Sarah Healy, they've really stepped on over the last couple of years. And yeah, I suppose circumstances didn't permit them to race at the weekend, but you'd like to see them back over the next couple of months, and again being competitive for us at European Cross later on this year.
And in terms of you know, women that are in their 30s or heading towards late 30s, is there more opportunity in middle to long distance than there is in sprinting? Like, I know Alison Felix obviously has a couple of children, Shelley-Ann Fraser-Price is the same, and they're still in top form.
Yeah, I guess sprinters being competitive into their 30s is more unusual than distance runners, and that's not just a female thing, that's you know, for men as well. The general peak for most sprinters is in their mid-20s. Whereas the general peak performance for most middle distance athletes, male and female, tends to be in their early to mid 30s. So particularly, I suppose, if you take the example of somebody who takes a year out to have kids and maybe around their late 20s, early 30s, you get those years back later on. There's that couple of years where you're not training at a high level, and you often find with athletes who are competitive into their late 30s and maybe up to 40 years of age, is there some period of their career due to injury or pregnancy or whatever it might have been, that they've missed 2 or 3 years, and that's allowed them, I suppose, allow their body to recover from those years of hard training, and provides a little bit of freshness. And when they come back to the sport, that it allows them to continue, and there's a little bit more longevity to their careers then. Yeah,
no, it's certainly interesting. I mean, I thought it was very cool to see, you know, that age demographic on the podium. And obviously, like, Fionnuala has always stood out to me as an athlete that is just, you know, next level. But the two girls that were chasing there, I hadn't actually seen them before, and when they were on the track, I couldn't tell how old they were at all. And then I was chatting to their mom after. I was like, do you mind me asking how old they are? And I just thought it was really interesting that, you know, all three on the podium for the national championships are 37 years old. So yeah, look, it's really interesting, and from our audience perspective, it shows the scope to stay involved in sport, the reasons why you'd stay involved in sport, that having kids doesn't mean that you have to stop being involved in sport at any level as well. So certainly a refreshing side on that type of things, and we'll have to let Rob know not to be concerned that there's lots of people coming up. He seemed a bit worried the other day.
Yeah, I think when you look over, like, because our female teams over the last couple of years have performed so well at European cross country, and like, if you look down the road to the European Championships in a couple of weeks' time, we've got a really strong women's marathon team going there. So Fionnuala, Anne-Marie McGlynn, who I just mentioned, and Aoife Cook from Cork. And they've got a really strong chance of taking a medal in the team event at the marathon in the European Championships. Now, I suppose maybe what might actually feed back to Rob's point and yours is that Anne-Marie is 41, Fionnuala is 37. Aoife is obviously a little bit younger than that, but the average age would be maybe a little bit more concerning that they're not going to be back for another championship down the line. But it is, like you said there, it's inspirational for people to see athletes at that age coming back and being competitive on the international stage and being in positions to win medals. It gives people so much encouragement that it can be done. It's certainly complicated. It's not straightforward when you've got family and everything else to deal with, but it's when the circumstances are right, it's great to see.
Yeah, no, look, in terms of Fionnuala, like obviously she's still getting faster and faster, like her marathon times are quick and she's getting some really good results. So I was talking to her after European cross country and she's like, yeah, I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. So we'll have her still competing over the next few years anyway. But that was brilliant, Emma. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat to us about national championships, and congratulations again.
Thank you very much.